Lamb to the Slaughter is a short story written by Roald Dahl, first published in 1953. It tells the story of Mary Maloney, a devoted wife. The story goes like: the room was warm and clean, the curtains drawn, the two table lamps alight, hers and the one by the empty chair opposite. On the sideboard behind her, two tall glasses, soda water, whiskey. Fresh ice cubes in the thermos bucket. Mary Maloney was waiting for her husband to come home from work. Now and again she would glance up at the clock, but without anxiety, merely to please herself with the thought that each minute gone by made it nearer the time when he would come. There was a slow smiling air about her, and about everything she did. The drop of her head as she bent over her sewing was curiously tranquil. Her skin, for this was her 6th month with child, had acquired a wonderful translucent quality. The mouth was soft, and the eyes, with their new placid look, seemed larger, darker than before. When the clock said 10 minutes to 5, she began to listen, and a few moments later, punctually as always, she heard the tires on the gravel outside, and the car door slamming, the footsteps passing the window, the key turning in the lock. She laid aside her sewing, stood up, and went forward to kiss him as he came in. "Hello, darling," she said. "Hello, darling," he answered. She took his coat and hung it in the closet. Then she walked over and made the drinks, a strongish one for him, a weak one for herself, and soon she was back again in her chair with the sewing, and he in the other, opposite, holding the tall glass with both hands, rocking it so the ice cubes tinkled against the side. For her, this was always a blissful time of day. She knew he didn't want to speak much until the first drink was finished, and she, on her side, was content to sit quietly, enjoying his company after the long hours alone in the house. She loved to luxuriate in the presence of this man, and to feel, almost as a sunbather feels the sun, that warm male glow that came out of him to her when they were alone together. She loved him for the way he sat loosely in a chair, for the way he came in a door, or moved slowly across the room with long strides. She loved the intent, far look in his eyes when they rested in her, the funny shape of the mouth, and especially the way he remained silent about his tiredness, sitting still with himself until the whiskey had taken some of it away. "Tired, darling?" she asked. "Yes," he said, "I'm tired," and as he spoke, he did an unusual thing. He lifted his glass and drained it in one swallow, although there was still half of it, at least half of it left. She wasn't too surprised. It wasn't the first time that he had come home tight. In a way, this was a restful and comforting thought. Whatever he had been doing it for the last few hours at least with complete freedom. That was a nice fact to remember. And she couldn't bother with the washing up now. She simply rinsed out the glasses, filled the thermos bucket to the brim with ice, and carried it into the living room with the two drinks. She watched him as he began to sip the dark yellow drink, and she could see little oily swirls in the liquid because it was so strong. She didn't notice that the smile on his face had disappeared as quickly as it had come. She was struck by the quickness with which he had downed the first drink, and she hurried to get the food ready, wanting to please him. As she was taking the leg of lamb out of the oven, he turned to her and said, "Sit down." He had an unusual tone in his voice, and she looked at him in surprise. He repeated himself, more sharply this time, and she obeyed, sitting down in the chair opposite him. He told her he was leaving her and that he had been having an affair with someone at work. She couldn't believe it, and her mind went blank with shock. As he turned away from her, she grabbed the leg of lamb and struck him on the head with it. He fell to the ground, and she hit him again and again until he was dead. She stood there for a moment, dazed and unsure of what to do, but then she realized she needed to cover up what she had done. She quickly thought of a plan and went to work. She put the lamb in the oven to cook, washed her hands and face, and went to the grocery store to get some vegetables for dinner. She made sure to act normally when she got home, making conversation with the grocer and chatting with the police officers who came to investigate her husband's murder. She even offered them a drink and some of the lamb, which they eagerly accepted. As the officers ate the evidence, Mary smiled to herself, knowing that she had outsmarted them all. She would never be caught, and her husband's betrayal would remain a secret forever. Over the next few days, Mary played the role of the grieving widow perfectly. She cried and mourned her husband's death, even going as far as to tell the detectives that she had no idea who could have done such a thing to her dear husband. The investigation went on for weeks, but the police found no clues or leads. Mary continued to act the part of the grieving widow, but inside she felt triumphant. She had gotten away with murder, and no one suspected a thing. One day, the detectives visited her home again to ask some follow-up questions. As they chatted, one of the detectives commented on how strange it was that the murder weapon had never been found. Mary replied innocently that she had no idea where it could be. As they were leaving, one of the detectives mentioned how good the leg of lamb had tasted on the night of her husband's death. Mary smiled and thanked him, but inside she felt a sudden jolt of fear. Had they figured it out? After the detectives left, Mary went into the kitchen and looked at the oven. The leg of lamb was gone, and she realized with horror that she had served it to the detectives. She had unknowingly fed them the murder weapon. She tried to compose herself, but when the detectives came back a few minutes later, she could barely contain her panic. They asked her some more questions, but she could hardly hear them over the pounding of her heart. When they finally left, she collapsed in a chair, knowing that she had been caught. In the end, Mary was arrested and charged with her husband's murder. She pleaded guilty and was sent to prison, her life and freedom forever changed by one moment of rage and desperation. The story ends with a twist that shows the power of human emotions and how they can drive someone to commit a heinous crime. Mary Maloney was a seemingly ordinary housewife who was pushed to the brink by her husband's infidelity. In a fit of rage, she killed him with a frozen leg of lamb, but her quick thinking and calculated actions helped her cover up the crime. However, Mary's arrogance and lack of remorse ultimately led to her downfall. She unknowingly served the murder weapon to the police officers who were investigating her husband's death, revealing her guilt and sealing her fate. The story also highlights the idea of justice and how it can sometimes be served in unexpected ways. Mary thought she had gotten away with murder, but in the end, she was brought to justice for her crime. Overall, Lamb to the Slaughter is a gripping and suspenseful short story that delves into the dark side of human nature and the consequences of one's actions. It is a cautionary tale that reminds us of the power of our emotions and the importance of thinking before we act. If you want to hear more such stories, please write in the comments box and we will try to bring you the story. Thank you. Please subscribe, like and share the story.